I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 29 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I'm Carolyn Solo, your host, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Today's episode was supposed to be titled Interweaves Part 2, because last week was Interweaves Part 1. But, and you will soon see why, I want you to know now that the long and unclean, unclear, messy, and that's an intentional word choice, title for this week's episode is actually Interweaves Part 2, and on showing up and keeping our word, however we do that, even if it's messy. That's the true name of episode 29. So, and oh my God, I have had this cough for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, however many episodes I've been coughing on. I am over it. And I also started sneezing again yesterday, so I think I might be going into another cold. So moms of kids in school, you get me, this time of year is, can I just lock myself in the closet until spring? No, I don't want to do that because I actually love winter, but this part of winter, I hate having kids in school and them all getting sick and all of us getting sick and none of us sleeping. I can't. I just can't. But here I am showing up, however I do it, even if it's messy. Okay. So I am going to talk a little bit more about interweaves because I said I would do that and I want to keep my word. But I'm going to talk about it a bit at the end of the episode. But first, I want to be honest about where I'm at this week. So I'm a mom, as I say many times an episode, as well as a therapist. My ear itches. Hold on. A small business owner, a podcaster, a business coach, a partner, a daughter, a friend, everything else, a housekeeper. Ha ha ha. No, I'm definitely not that. But you know, the house chef, the personal shopper for my whole household, whatever, all those roles, right? And for the past couple of weeks, the precarious house of cards that keeps all these roles in some sort of balance has really been starting to teeter and totter. The illness certainly hasn't helped that we've all had, although we're coming out of it. The fact that it's December and that the holidays are here and everything that goes on with that, especially with kids with all the school stuff and making magic for them and making sure that everything is wrapped and under the tree and that play the dreidel game and blah, 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 blah. None of that is making any of this any easier. And also my kids are going through a lot right now. And I actually don't want to talk about that a whole lot today. A lot of you know that my oldest child is PDA profile autistic. PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance, although I prefer to call it persistent demand avoidance. Because I don't think of it as pathological. I just think that it is. But that's a challenge. And my other 2 kids are complex in many ways, and also 5 and 2, which just makes them complex anyway. So there's a lot going on for them, but I don't want to go into too much detail in that today. There are other times that I will, but not today. But I'm also going through my own stuff that is separate from momming, beyond professional stuff, but including professional stuff, some shifts in my business, planning for the next year. What is a podcast going to look like? What goals do I have? How do I want my therapy practice to look? How do I want my business coaching to look? How do I want my clinical consultation arm of my business to look? That's all a lot to manage. And, apparently, getting real personal, apparently now I'm also in perimenopause. I'm 43. I'll be 44 in June. I have 3 babies, as you know, but I am apparently, and I had my last one July, she'll be 3. So, not totally that far from my prime fertile years, I guess. But I am apparently now in perimenopause. And again, I'm not going to tell you exactly why I know that, but for those of you that identify with that, it's been a fantastic and wild ride so far. And apparently it's going to go on for the next 10 plus years. And the fun just continues. So far, not loving it, not a huge fan. Working with I have an appointment scheduled to go to my OBGYN practice next week to be like, let's talk about this. Let me get ahead of some of this. Let me really be proactive about this. and again, if you're not watching the video, you can't see this, but I've been noticing I've been getting these like reddish kind of rashes on my cheeks more, which apparently for some people in perimenopause, like rosacea can be an issue. So maybe I'm going to start having that, which is cool. Life, but change is hard. Like for me, the identity of being a fertile person, as much as that sounds weird and gross, a person who thought about having regular periods and getting pregnant and having babies, that was like a big part of my identity for a long time. And I'm grappling now with the fact that that period of my life is very clearly, for a lot of reasons, coming to an end. So yeah, there's that. It's been really intense. It's been hitting me very hard psychologically this week. There's also some health stuff among the adults in my close family, which is profoundly impacting, frankly, the plans that my immediate family has for our future as a family. I'll probably talk about some of that, not the like excruciatingly personal stuff, but like what that might mean for me as a business owner. Maybe in the next few months if it feels relevant, but it's taking a toll. And then there are also just, the 5,000 additional demands that parenting in December requires, and it's just a lot. And then also, and I am verging into the political here, and if this does not feel good to you to hear me say, that is your right. I still want to say it because this is my platform and it's been heavy on my heart. I've been really struggling with the trauma and the horror around the genocide in Gaza. I feel like I'm tearing up right now. And again, I said I was going to show up messy on this podcast, and I'm being super messy. I'm not going to edit any of this out. I'm just going to leave it here. And, I want you to know who I am. And if that's not someone that aligns with who you are, you don't have to listen to me. But I'm still going to show you who I am. Yeah, the trauma and horror around the genocide in Gaza, because that's what I call it. That's what it is to me. I believe it is. I firmly believe it's a genocide. It's been horrifying all along, of course, since October 7th. I mean, since beyond before that, but just the way that the accelerated suffering has been happening since October 7th. The past couple of weeks, I've just been feeling so devastated by it. And I'm glad that these parts of my humanity are still there. Sometimes it can feel hard to access that, like, being activated and horrified and sometimes we just feel like I want to look away. I'm overwhelmed. I don't have it in me to care about this. I'm glad that I'm not feeling that way. I have had those times in my life, but it's just felt so overwhelming. And I have tremendous privilege in so many ways in my life. That I'm safe, that my family is safe, that we have so many resources. Like, I can look away from this if I choose to, like, so much privilege. And that I have to recognize this privilege is real, even when I'm struggling, as I've been talking about. And also I have all these privileges and I'm struggling, and in Gaza, all these babies are dying. And I can't claim to fully understand the origins of this conflict. I am doing my research, but this is not the forum for me to try to educate myself and everyone about that. My heart breaks for the Jews who have died and for their families. My heart breaks for the Jews and the Palestinians who have been held hostage and suffered that trauma. Like I said, I'm not an expert on Middle East politics. All I know is that it feels true to me to call what is happening in Gaza a genocide. And if some of you listening disagree, of course, that's your right. And I'm being honest about what's on my heart. And so for those of you who are watching this on YouTube and not listening to it on the podcast or watching it on video, yes, I did get a haircut. I actually got it today, and thank God I got it. I really needed it. It was the best thing that I've done this week, given all this other stuff. My heart and my soul needed that lift. And my stylist is amazing, and she let me rant about mom stuff for an hour while she clipped away and styled. And so shout out to Angel at Natural State Salon in Erdenheim, Pennsylvania. So for all of these reasons, this episode did not get the time that I needed to give it this week. Normally when I'm podcast prepping, I write a very thorough outline. I do research. I have beyond bullet points, actually. I tend to write like a full script. And maybe I don't need to do that anymore, but because I'm ad-libbing a lot more right now. I still have my point. If you see me looking over, I still have my bullet points. But anyway, I just did not have the time and frankly, the bandwidth or the desire. I just didn't want to do all that prep work in the same way this week. But I knew that I'd feel pretty shitty about skipping this week. I thought I was like, maybe I should skip the week. I didn't want to give myself that permission. It didn't feel right. I'd be breaking a promise to myself. I've promised that I will hit 50 episodes in 52 weeks. And if I'd skipped this week, that would have meant that I wasn't going to make that goal. So I said, you know what? I'm going to show up messy. And here I am showing up messy. Another messy thing, I'm all out of contacts right now. And so I'm wearing my glasses and I kept meaning to call the eye doctor, kept not doing it. Finally called this morning. I said, I need to order some contacts. They said, your prescription's expired. You haven't been here in 18 months. I thought I was there 6 months ago. Mom brain, apparently not. So I'm going to be without contacts for 2 more weeks while I wait until I can get my butt in there for an appointment. Life is messy. I screw up stuff all the time, drop balls all the time. As someone has said to me, a wise person, you can drop the plastic balls, not the glass ones, right? So, of course, not having contacts, that's a plastic ball. But, you know that feeling of like, I don't have anything under control. I don't have anything together. I'm a mess. The whole contact thing just made me feel that even more. So yeah, here I am showing up really messy, really unvarnished, really like being just in some ways not a very professional version of me. But I am going to talk about Interweaves. That was 11 minutes of me talking about me off the cuff. But I'm going to do it, my Interweave talking, also about Interweaves and kind of off the cuff and without too much prep beyond a few bullet points. Let's see how it goes. Next week, I'm going to kind of get back to my normal way of doing things. Maybe. Or maybe doing it this way will feel liberating and everyone will say that was your best episode yet. Who knows? But we'll find out. All I do know is I don't feel super excited about talking about Interweaves this week. I'm still going to do it, but I might just talk about it for a few minutes and say, well, the end. But I think that's such a huge part of why I talk about intensives so much as an option for therapists in their practice. It's because I do feel that offering them gives me more space to figure stuff out when things fall apart. I firmly believe that being an intensive therapist allows me to be more human, gives me more space to show up better in all the different roles I play in my life. And I was able to reschedule intensive clients this week, and I had to. And I could do that because I wasn't back to back with 6 clients a day, 7 clients a day. Trying to reschedule all that feels so exhausting. So sharing with this more messy kind of personal side of me does connect so much with my why, my big why for this whole podcast, for my whole approach to helping other therapists, like that it is a model that is more supportive of the therapist, I think. It's not just that it's more effective for clients, which I also think is true. So I felt like, okay, why not tell you in a very real way about why that feels very true to me this week? Why not just show up and be messier than usual? So that's enough of that. I really am going to start talking about Interweaves now. And then I'm out. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to talk for too long. A little about Interweaves, and then I'm going to go take care of all the other parts of me in my life that need attention, because clearly they do. They need that. So thank you for hearing all that. If you haven't turned off the podcast by now, thank you. I do care about keeping my word, right? And last week I said that I was going to talk more about Interweaves in this episode. So here I am. I'm going to talk more about Interweaves, but I do think that the podcast can trigger some of my I need to be useful negative self-talk and my perfectionism, right? If I'm not providing value to you, chock full of clinical tips and marketing tips and strategies and lots of take homes and stuff so you can implement right away, then you're not going to feel like you're getting what you need. And you'll say, screw you, Carolyn, not listening to you again. Right. So I think I do put that pressure on myself. And so, hey, I'm challenging that a little this week. So it is what it is, right? So no more prologue. I'm 15 minutes of other stuff, and now I'll talk about interweaves. Let's see. I'm going to talk a bit about an interweave type that I didn't talk about last time, a somatic interweave. We focused a lot on cognitive interweaves. In fact, when I first learned about interweaves, I was told that they were cognitive interweaves, right? Like a question to promote a new way of thinking, to like make a connection, a new perspective. But one of the reasons we all love EMDR so much is that it's not just about cognition, right? It's about the vestiges of trauma that are stored in our bodies. And often that's the biggest thing that we're trying to release. So sometimes our interweaves need to directly address that, right? The stuck stuff in the body, right? It's not just our thoughts. If it were just our thoughts, we'd all still be doing CBT, right? So some of the interweaves that I consider more somatic are things like, if a client says an emotion, I just feel really scared right now in this moment. Okay, where do you feel that? Oh, I can feel it in my chest. It feels really tight. I feel like I can't breathe. Okay, let's take a breath. Can you put your hand on your heart? Send some warmth to that tightness. And let's concentrate on that for this set. See what comes up, right? That can just loosen something a little bit for someone, maybe, and allow them to kind of at least, one, maybe sit with the feeling of that panic a little bit more instead of kind of separating from it. And maybe notice the fact that it's shifting. And just the noticing in the moment of it shifting is a very powerful intervention, right? If this is a memory that they have felt fearful of for a long time, or a particular moment they've avoided, noticing that they can sit with that feeling and move through it is a powerful interweave. Sometimes if they're having a very strong sensation, I'll say, what does that sensation want you to know? Or can you describe what that sensation looks like and feels like, like all the five senses or whatever. Obviously, the where do you feel that in your body thing is huge. And if it's a difficult feeling, a difficult body sensation, I'll say, notice that you're able to stay with that and sit with that and tolerate that. What does that mean? To me, that's an interweave, right? An interweave is anything we do that's not just go with that, right? Like I talked about last week. Any of these things are interweaves. And sometimes, and you may have had clients who are, who have been victims of a violent crime or like physical or sexual abuse, or maybe are survivors of rape or sexual assault, right? And you can see some like tension in their bodies, like maybe they're clenching their fists or they seem really, really like they want to move. I'll say, what is your body telling you that it wants to do right now? Oh, I just want to like punch them in the face. Can you do that? And so sometimes they'll even, physically punch a pillow or like make the punching sound or like imagine doing it. Once I had a client imagine impaling somebody on a spike. Who am I to judge? I was like, and trust me, this person deserved to be impaled on a spike. But, and she really like made this motion like she was doing it. That's an interweave. Okay. Right. And it creates a sense of empowerment at times. And it allows that stuck stuff in the body to actually move. Right. So somatic interweaves. And I just think sometimes when we hear, like when we learn interweaves or cognitive interweaves, I always like the longer I've been an EMDR therapist, the longer I've thought like, well, that's really curious, right? Because we talk so much about how EMDR is bottom up, right? So interweaves can't just be cognitive. We're not just like drawing the dots and saying this makes sense and that makes sense. Things don't have to make sense in a cognitive, rational way in EMDR to create movement for the client, right? So, and like, these are not interweaves. Like the thing about interweaves often is that you can't like prepare for them, right? You have to have, I think what is helpful is to know that there are a variety of options out there. And that's kind of why I'm giving you some examples. But like you're not going to be like, oh, okay, I have my 100 questions memorized. I don't know about you, but when I did my basic training, I got a page of interweaves, page of questions. I don't think that they were suggesting that we memorize those questions. It was more like, these are some of the things that you could ask, right? So this is why EMDR is infinitely adaptive and creative, right? You have a solid conceptualization of your client that is going to help you use the interweaves that are most productive. And for a lot of clients who have experienced violence of a lot of different, bullying is another example. If someone was bullied a lot in school, they really often have a very strong desire to like punch that motherfucker in the face. This is me being messy. I'm just swearing on here. And I'm just like, let's imagine punching Mike Mohan. That's somebody who bullied me, by the way. So I'm using his name. I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen to this podcast. I like to imagine punching Mike Mohan in the face when he said that horrible thing to me at my locker when I was in 6th grade. Why not? Right? And that is an interweave. Okay. It really, really is. And so we can think about interweaves in such a broad, expansive way. All right. And now I'm moving to my other like little bullet pointed list. I'm just freewheeling it here. Speaking of freewheeling, I like to call this one resourcing on the fly. Okay. In the moment resourcing. So I think, when we learn resourcing, and I'm pretty sure I talked about resourcing. Yeah, I did. In some earlier episodes when I talked about like adapting each of the phases to the intensive model, I definitely talked about, phase 2 and resourcing and preparation. But resourcing can happen. We use resources at any time during the 8 phases, and we can create resources at any time during the 8 phases, not just during phase 2. And sometimes the resourcing that we do during the prep phase, most of the time, does not give us all the resources that we need to use during reprocessing. And I believe using resources is an interweave, right? As I've said, and I think that Francine Shapiro would agree with me, saying literally anything beyond notice that is an interweave, okay? So yes, like creating a resource in the moment when a client is stuck is an interweave, right? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, you don't even have to be like, okay, let's install this. Let's do slow BLS. No, you don't have to do that. Okay. You don't have to do that. If a client is really struggling with feeling like I'm a bad mom, like this thing happened to my child. Maybe I worked with someone whose child was in an accident. My client wasn't there when it happened. It wasn't a car accident. It was like a playground accident, basically. But my client still struggled with tremendous guilt around that, right? I'm a bad mom. How could I let this happen? Like all that stuff. And one of the things that we really needed to do with her, and this was on the fly, this sort of emerged in the moment, was that for a lot of reasons, she had many beliefs about being a bad mom. It was not just about this moment. So we resourced and we said, let's think of a moment in which you were like an incredible mom to your child. And we brought that in that moment when she just kept getting stuck in, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad mom. That was a resource, like, RDI, resource development installation, whatever the heck we call it. Laurel Parnell's tapping in, whatever, It was not one of your like safe, calm place, protector, wise figure, nurturer, and light stream, but it was a resource, right? But we came up with it right there, and it was the resource she needed for that moment, right? On the fly resourcing. Another one that I will often ask or say, if a client is looping or is really stuck, who or what do you need with you right now? Do you need to hear from right now or in that moment? It could either be right now in this moment as you're processing it, or who did you need or what did you need in that moment then, right? And just let them start to resource in that way. Often like a kind of like a nurturing figure will come in or a protective figure will come in, right? Which is, again, why we do some of that installation in phase 2, but you can absolutely do it in phase 4 as an interweave, right? What might they have said or done? What might you need them to say? What did you need them to say now? What did you need them to say to you then? And, sometimes people will say, I needed someone to come in and protect me. Okay. Who do you want to have protect you right now? Whatever the figure comes in. Another client that I work with around a bullying incident, this was not me and Mike Mohan, but speaking of bullying, a kid who was during kindergarten, she wanted her grandmother to come into the kindergarten lunchroom and yell at all the kids. And so that's what we had happen. And the grandmother, I'm trying to remember if we'd installed her as a resource. I don't think we had, actually. And I don't think her grandmother came up at any other point during our processing, but for whatever reason, that particular moment felt like her grandmother's presence was exactly what she needed. So just remember, like any kind of on-the-fly resourcing counts as an interweave, and you don't need to have installed them first, okay? You did not do anything wrong if you didn't install them first. They will be just as effective in the moment, maybe even more so, okay? So that's kind of why I like to call it resourcing on the fly. Sometimes Who or what do you need with you right now? I need my cat. Okay, great. Let's imagine your cat is here with you. What would you do if your cat were sitting with you right now? Like, it doesn't have to be one of those resources that they teach us in basic training. By the way, and I may have said this in other episodes, probably did, I often don't do all of those in preparation anyway. In the workbook that I use to prepare clients for intensives, there's a part in which they kind of work on developing some resources themselves that they think might be useful based on what we're going to focus on. And then a lot of times we'll install a couple of those. You do not, and FYI, something I almost never use is container. I have found that it doesn't feel very useful for a lot of my clients. I do have a few for whom it has felt useful. And I don't know, I really have no sense of the truth about this at all. So please know that this is not backed up by anything except for my anecdotal experience. But often I find that clients for whom container is useful tend to have more resources in other ways, like clients who are maybe don't have as severe trauma, complex trauma, maybe are in more stable living situations. Like the container feels more accessible to them. But I have a lot of clients who've been through a lot who are like, how would that help me? Like, it's not going to stay in there. Like, I don't believe that. That doesn't feel safe to me. So anyway, not to dismiss container, but if it's been your experience that container hasn't worked for you, just validating that that's been my experience with a lot of people as well. So yeah, a little about resourcing on the fly. So I'm proud of myself. I think I managed to talk for almost 10 minutes about Interweaves, kind of off the cuff with just some bullet points. And also considering that I wasn't feeling super into talking about them this week. But I still did it, right? Right. I was supposed to talk part 2 about Interweaves, but a lot of what I wanted to talk about was the messiness of being a mom, therapist, business owner, human, deep feeler, witnesser of history and genocide, the person who tries to show up in a million ways, every day for a million different things, just like you. A little bit all over the place today, but hey, I'd be interested in hearing what you thought. As we wrap up the year, as we wrap up 2023, I'm going to drop one more episode next week. And then I do have already, I can't believe it, I'm planning 2 weeks in advance. One of my goals for 2024 is to get ahead of my workload on the podcast so I'm not scrambling like I was this week. But I do have something I have a very New Year's-y type episode that I'm excited to record the first week of January. But next week, last week of the year, we're going to cover imposter syndrome as an EMDR therapist and how that can show up when EMDR therapists decide to offer intensives, and a little teaser why I think that offering intensives is an amazing way to push through some of that imposter syndrome. So thank you for sticking with me through this somewhat messy episode. And hey, if it was too messy for you, that's okay too. You don't need to stick around if this isn't for you, right? But feel free to let me know how this landed with you. I think by now, you guys, if you've listened a bit, you know how to get in touch with me. My website is www.futuretemplateparent.com. You can join my email list there, get my free guide to implementing intensives in your practice. I also do consultation for certification. And you can connect with me on Instagram at futuretemplateparent. Looking forward to talking to you next week. And thanks to all of you for hanging in with me through this messy episode. Take care.